Boker Tov, today's daf is Daf Chav Zayin and Gitin, as we learn for a four shlem for Lazar ben Ruma and Yotzim ben Chaim Michal. Says the Mishnah, how maybe get? A man is bringing a get. He's a shliach. We're talking about a shliach bringing a get since the beginning of Masechta, right? He's bringing a get. Va'avad, he lost it. Happens sometimes. We've all lost things. Matzal, if he finds it immediately, L'alter is, Kati says, is al atar, on the spot, like on the spot, on that place. Found it immediately, then kosher, it's okay. Meaning, what's the concern? You drop the get, you're on your way, and you lost the get. If you found it right away, there's no concern that maybe this is somebody else's get. Maybe it's somebody else with the same names, Reuben and Rivka getting divorced. Maybe it's, you don't have to worry about it. If you found it right away, then it's kosher. We'll see what immediate means. How much time has elapsed? Is it a time issue, or is it an issue where you were sure that nobody else passed by that spot? You found it, you dropped it on the road, you looked, you went back, and you were sure that nobody else was there at that time, could have passed it. Then that could be what alter means. But if you found it right away, it's kosher, no problem. Imla.
Doesn't he have to say,
Yeah, that's right.
So he knows who.
He knows he was there for the signing of Reuven's divorcing Rivka. He was there, and he took the get. Now the concern is when he dropped it, is it's the same get?
He knows it's the same get. He was there when it was
maybe there's somebody else with the same names.
For a while.
No, maybe he's not sure if it's the same document. He knows that Reuven gave it to him, and he knows where he's going to give it to Rivka. The concern is this the same document? Or is it somebody else who had a similar name, and that document is what he found?
But he saw the AD sign on it. He knows who signed it.
He knows who signed it. Maybe first of all, he
talking about
okay. That's right. Maybe exactly. Maybe
the
same. Right. That's right. Maybe he didn't take notice. He saw them sign it, but he didn't remember what their names were. Maybe he didn't remember the names of the eight. He saw the thing take place, but funny enough, he saw it written, he saw it signed. He saw Reuben said to him, "Take it to Rivka, my wife in Los Angeles or whatever, in Israel." And he saw. Now maybe he didn't take notice of the names. He saw them sign it. He saw it, but he didn't take notice. It's written in. What do you have to take notice for? It's written in the document, right? When you have a document from the bank or something, you saw them sign it. You remember the guy's name? Not necessarily. It's on the document. Now the question is it the same document? When he finds it, is it the same one? Now we'll see. If he has a siman on it, he knows for sure it had a little hole over here at this letter. Okay, that's different. But now we're talking about that. We're just talking about if he finds it. If he finds it right away, there's no concern. He found it right away. There was nobody else could have dropped it there because it's a few minutes later, or he saw that nobody else was on this road. That's one way. Imlav. If he didn't get it right away, puzzle. It's forbidden. It's disqualified because maybe it's somebody else's get. Don't forget, if there was somebody else, let's say there was another Reuben and Rivka getting divorced, and maybe that document fell on the floor. You can't divorce a different person even though they have the same names. It's not l'shma. Okay, but let's say he found it in some sort of a container. All right, we'll see. It's like a leather container, or in a bag. In makiro kosher. So with two ways to learn. Rashi learns these are separate issues, meaning milsa ba'antinafshika ba'o'oktani, osha makiro ba'afilu matza b'chol makom kosher. If he found it, let's say, in a box or a container or a bag, and he knows the bag, that's his bag, he knows the bag, then it's okay. Or if he just recognized it, it's okay. Even if he recognized it, how does he recognize it? In makiro milsa. If he recognizes it, he's got some sort of a siman on it, that's also kosher. So again, if he can't recognize it, and it wasn't in a box, it was just a loose piece of paper, if he finds it right away, it's kosher. If he didn't find it right away, it's puzzle. Says the Gemara right away, what do you mean? You have to find it right away for a minute. Let's say you found, you didn't drop it, you found the get of a woman. You found the get of a woman. The question is, did it fall from her? She's divorced already. Or did it fall from her husband? Maybe her husband wrote the get and he said, I changed my mind. I'm not going to give it to her. Who dropped it? How do you know? Right? You found the get in the street. Or a document of freedom for an evet, or daitaki, or a last testament of an old man who was dying. or matano, so you found a star that there was a gift that was testifying to a gift, or a shover, or a receipt. You shouldn't return it. Could be they were written and they were never executed. Maybe the guy wrote it. He wrote a star, he wrote a bill of sale ready to make the sale. The guy didn't show up with the money, so he didn't give him the bill of sale. Right? And maybe they changed their mind, so you can't right? You can't return it. Shalom Shani Omer, I think, because I could say they were written, and he decided, he changed his mind. He's not going to give it out. So what do you see over here? Right? But the deduction is, the reason is what? The reason, if you find them in the street, you don't return them, because maybe the guy wrote it and he didn't want to give it. Maybe the bill of sale he didn't want to give to the purchaser because the guy didn't come up with the money. Or maybe the man changed his mind, didn't divorce his wife, so you can't give it. Why? Because that's what I say. Maybe. You don't know who to return it to. If he said, though, give it to him. If he said, give it to my wife because it fell from her, or give it to the purchaser because I actually sold it to him, or give it to the Evet or whatever, give the receipt out. If a man says give it, you would give it. I feel it's mashma, even for a long period of time. It doesn't say anything about time. Our mission says if you found it right away, it's kosher. Otherwise, it's not kosher. If you found it after a few hours, maybe somebody else dropped it with a similar name. Here it's mashma. You don't return it only because you don't know who to return it to. But if the man says give it to them, it's mashma, you return it, even after a long period of time. That's what the deduction is. We'll see later on. There's an opinion that says maybe you can't make that deduction. But so there's two ways to learn of it, several ways to learn. But Rabbah gives the first explanation. How to resolve the difference between our mission, which says if you don't find it right away, it's puzzle, unless you have a simon, right? Unless you have a simon on it, if you don't find it right away, it's puzzle. And over there, it's mashma. Even if you find it after a long period of time, if the man says give it to her, you give it to her. Meaning, if the husband says that, give the get to my wife, you're not concerned that maybe it fell from somebody else and whatever, that it's somebody else's shtar, that it's not his. So Rabbah says it depends if there's traffic there or not. Our mission is speaking about where there's a lot of traffic. There's a lot of traffic. Could have fallen from somebody else. You were walking along, and there were caravans there. There was a lot of traffic there. Could have fallen from somebody else, right? Over there, it's making a return, but there's not a lot of traffic. But and the Gemara adds on, according to Rabbah, even if there's a lot of traffic, this that we say in our Mishnah, that if you find it not immediately, you found it later on, you can't, and there's no simon on it, you can't give it to the woman. Why? That's only if there's a lot of traffic there. And we know there's two Reubens in the same city. We know there's two Yosef ben Shimons. That's a standard line. We know there's two people by the same name in that city. So you don't know if it was his or if it was yours. That's why. So the reason, in other words, normally if you find something and we're saying, and if there's not a lot of traffic there, come on, not a lot of traffic. There's only one person by that name in this city. It's obvious that it came from you. But our mission is speaking about, right, where it's known that there were two people with the same name in the city. That's his interpretation of Rabbah. And there's a lot of traffic there. If you don't explain this in Rabbah, when Rabbah says there's a lot of traffic there, it's also not only is there a lot of traffic, but there also had to be two people had the same name in that city. Otherwise, we wouldn't say it's puzzle. We would say, it's probably yours, and you can give it to her. If you don't say that you need both of these requirements in order to say it's puzzle, Kasha Rabbah got a kasha with Rabbah on himself. He's self-contradicting. Dahu Gita. There was a get. There was a get found in the Bezdin of Rav Huna. Now, in the Bezdin is a place. Bezdin is a place where a lot of people pass by. And it says in the get, in the town of Shvire, remember I explained yesterday that the gitin are usually only given in a place that's near a river, a city near it could be identified, like Frankfurt am Main, New York on the Hudson. In that city, near the river, which is on the river Rachis. That's what it said. Do I have to be concerned that there are two cities by that name? I mean, there's only one guy in that city, right? And it was getting by this name, and it's on this city. Do I have to be concerned? Maybe there's another city by the same name, and they've got another guy by the same name in that city. Do I have to be concerned about that? It's like a question. The Gemara says, Rav Chisda said to Rabbah, and we're trying to show the story that Rabbah, because Rabbah was Rabbah Shita here. Rav Chisda said to Rabbah, go out, check this matter out. do you have to be concerned? They found there was a get that was found at the Bezdin of Huna, and it says this so and so, and we know this guy Reuven or Yosef and Shimon, whatever, in that town, his name is on the get. He gave the get, and the question is do we have to be concerned? Maybe there's another city by that same name, like Jericho or Jerusalem or whatever. We have several cities by the same name. Because in the evening he's going to Rafuna's going to ask you about the sign. Knows Rafuna was his base medrash, his court, and they found this get. They came to him. He says, "Do I have to be concerned about two shviras?" So Rav Chisda said, "Go investigate the matter, do some research, and check it out because Rafuna's going to ask you about it tonight." Nothing. He went out, he checked, and he found that Tanan Kol Ma'aseh Bezdin, any Ma'aseh Bezdin. Ma'aseh Bezdin means a Bezdin's confirmation. What would happen was a man normally would lend money to somebody and he'd have a star on it, he'd have an IOU written on it. Then he'd go to Bezdin and Bezdin would confirm it because he's afraid that if it would be contested, if the borrower would contest it and the Edom aren't around to confirm their signatures, they wanted Bezdin to confirm it right now. You can return it. You return it. In other words, this is like a Ma'aseh Bezdin. They found this document in the court. When you think about it, Rav Huna's place, Rav Huna's court was like a place with a lot of traffic because people are coming there. The Kapashan and still he says Yachser. Now, why would you be Yachser? Why would you Yachser? According to what Rabbah said before, Rabbah said if there's a lot of people there, Amish is speaking about there's a lot of people, so you don't return it. Right? It was after some time, you shouldn't return it. Elamai must be the reason you return it is Alma. The reason why you return it is because we don't know that there's two people by the same name in that city. Therefore, you don't have to be concerned about it. It is a place with a lot of traffic there. They found this get in the court of Rav Huna, right, where there's a lot of traffic there. And he says, don't worry, you can return it to the guy. It's his document. It's his get. You can give it back to him. No concern that it fell from somebody else, but because we don't know that there's two people by that. There's no confirmation that there's two people by the same name in that city. So therefore, it's okay to give it to them. So therefore, even though there's a lot of traffic and a lot of people could have come by, not enough to say it's possible just based on a lot of traffic. There had to be a lot of traffic and two people by the same name. So what we're doing is we're limiting, we're qualifying our mission. When our mission says if you lost your get, you were carrying a get. If you found it right away, it's fine. If you have a siman on it, that's fine too. But if you have no siman and you found it after an extended period of time, let's say half a day passed, well then it's puzzle. It's only puzzle if there's a lot of traffic there and it's known that there's two people by the same name in that city. Otherwise, you don't have to be concerned. Below, Rabbah himself. So Rabbah says you need those two qualifying matters to say it's possible. And he paskin in a Maisa, the real story. A Shiloh came up. Abba Rabbah Uvdi paskin in a real case. Bahu Gita with the get there was a get found at the flax factory, the flax processing plant in Pumbedisa. Kishmaite, like he paskin like himself. How's that? Some say beduchta hecha the tarkis. It's a place where they soak the flax there. Even though there was known that there were two people at the same name in that city, because there's not a lot of traffic at the flax plant. It's smelly there. There's not a lot of traffic over there. So, but there were two people at the same name in that city, but there weren't a lot of traffic. And as Rabbah says, it's only puzzle. You only have to be concerned that maybe it's not the get of that person that you think it is, only if there's a lot of traffic and there's two people by the same name in that city. Some say it's not the flax processing plant which stinks and there's not a lot of traffic there. It's the flax selling place where they sell the flax, like the market of the flax. There is a lot of traffic here. In other words, there's a lot of people traffic there, but there's no two people by the same name there. And therefore, Rabbi Paskin, you can return the get to him. So basically, if you drop a get or any document for that matter, the concern is when you find it, is that the one you drop? If you find it right away, no problem. If you have a siman, no problem. And even if you don't have a siman and you didn't find it right away, it's only no good. So you only have to be concerned that it's not the one that you dropped, only if there are two people by the same name in that locality and there's a lot of traffic there. That's how Rabbah learned this whole Gemara. He asked the kasha from a Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that it's puzzle if you don't find it right away. And over there, it's mashma that if you find it, you don't return it because maybe he changed his mind. But if he says give it, you can assume it's even after a long period of time. Rav Zera learns a different kasha. Rav Zera, Rami, he has the kasha masnis and a brisa. Our Mishnah on a brisa. How so? He gives this answer. Our Mishnah said, I maybe get Menu. Our Mishnah said, the Mishnah we at the top of this page. You brought a get and you lost it. You found it right away, kasha. Imlav, if you didn't find it right away, it's possible. Ramenu, how can you say that? Matzah get isha b'shuk. If you found the get of a woman in the marketplace, there's man shaval moda. If the husband is motivated, he gave it to her already, that it's hers, she's divorced. Yachsalisha, you give it back to her. Ain't about moda. Let's say the husband says, no, don't give it to her. Don't give it to her. Lo yachsalo you don't give it back to either one. Why not to either one? You don't give it back to the wife because she wasn't really divorced, right? Remember, she can't just pick up the get her own. He has to give it to her, or shliach has to give it to her. He says, no, don't give it to her. I never gave it to her. So if he says that, you don't give it back to her. Why don't you give it back to him?
Maybe it's not his. Maybe it's really not his. So
okay.
Maybe small.
So if it's not,
never use it anyway.
Okay, so you shouldn't use it again. The problem is the reason you shouldn't give it back to him is because maybe they really were divorced. And we'll have Adam that come along and say, yeah, we were there at the divorce. They're divorced. He'll use this now as a receipt to show that he got that he paid with the ksuba. Because the rule is, let's say a woman comes and says, I'm divorced, I lost my ksuba. She has to get, you give her the $200 based on that. But then he says, okay, give me the get. I don't want you to collect it again. So the get can function as a receipt for him. So we don't give it back to him. He found it on the street. You don't know whose it is. He says, don't give it to her. I never divorced her. So you don't give it to her, right? Because she's going to use it as proof that she can get remarried, and that's wrong. That's another reason. You're bringing down another good reason that maybe it wasn't his. Maybe it wasn't his. And he's going to use it to divorce her, right? But he's saying don't give it to her. He's saying don't give it to her. So don't give it to her. So don't give it to him either. So this is if he says give it to her, so you give it to her. All right? We assume it's kosher. It says matzah get isha b'shuk. Bisman shabal moda yachsal isha ain't about moda lo yachsal zeh. Bisman shabal moda, but the husband says give it to her. You're not concerned that it's somebody else's. You said maybe it's not his, right? There's no concern about that. The concern only is, he says, if he says give it to her, you give it to her. If he says don't give it to her, you don't give it to her because maybe he didn't divorce her with it. You don't give it to him either because maybe he wants to use it as a receipt. Fine, so don't give it to her. But if he says give it to her, you give it to her. If the husband says give it to her, it doesn't say anything about a time limit. So our Mishnah says if you don't find it right away, it's puzzle. There it says if you find it, if the husband says give it to her, you give it to her. So Rav Zera asked the kasha from that brisa on the Mishnah, and he answered, Mishani come up from Shasharish Mitzvahs, come up from Shasharish Mitzvahs. Okay, he says, right, that's the difference. The difference is you give it back to her where there's no traffic. Our Mishnah again is speaking about where there is traffic. Like Rabbah said, if there's a lot of traffic, then you don't give it back because maybe it fell from somebody else. Now, does he also hold like Rabbah holds, like we said on an Aleph, that it's not only if there's a lot of traffic, but also when is it possible? Not only if there's a lot of traffic, but also if there were two people by the same name in that city. Some say that there was a presumption. They knew that there were two people in the city with the same name. That's when you don't give it back. Behind the Rabbah. Because he's learning our Mishnah. Rav Zera learns just like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that it's possible if you don't find it right away. It's speaking about where there's a lot of traffic there, and there were two people with the same name in that city. Some say no, even if you don't have two people in the same city by the name, but if there's a lot of, you shouldn't give it back lo lahader. He says as long as there's a lot of traffic, you don't give it back. So Rav Zera learns possibly like Rabbah or possibly slightly different than Rabbah. In both cases, they both hold that our Mishnah is speaking about that where's it puzzle if you didn't find it right away, or if you have no simon, where there's a lot of traffic there. Rabbah adds on a lot of traffic and also two people have the same name in the same city. Why didn't Rabbah learn like Rav Zera and Rav Zera learn like Rabbah? Let's just switch this. Rabbah Mishlam or Rabbah Lo Rav Zera. Why didn't Rabbah ask the kasha of Rav Zera from the brisa that Rav Zera asked from? This case where you found again, if the husband says give it, you give it. If he says don't give it, you don't give it back to either one. Mishlam or Rabbah Lo Rav Zera must listen alim like shri. He'd rather ask kasha from the Mishnah. Our Mishnah as a Mishnah, maybe get Vavet Menu, and right away at the beginning of the Gemara that we learned today, it says the Mishnah Bamid says Matzah גיטין נשים שופר בadam. In fact, you find those things lo yachzer. So he's asking a kasha shani yomer ksum vayiv nimachlein shlo litnin, because I think maybe he didn't want to give it back, but if he says give it, give it. Okay, so the Mishnah Bamid says mashma that if you dropped it, the guy says give it, you give it. Our Mishnah says it's puzzle, so you ask a kasha from a Mishnah. So Rabbah lo Rav Zera must nislam. He'd rather ask from a Mishnah on a Mishnah. Rav Zera my time. Why didn't Rav Zera ask like Rabba from Mishnah. Why did he ask from Brisa? Didn't it say our Mishnah, the Bryce, the Mishnah that he asked from Bamitzia doesn't say, it says it didn't say in the Mishnah you deduced Homer Tnu Nosen. Yes, it's right. If he says Tnu Nosen, but it doesn't say Lizman Ruba. Says Rashi says over here Dimam Tnu Nosen Ula Olam Kerakam Kaima, meaning you don't know the Mishnah that he asked from Amar Aleph, the Rabbi asked from, didn't say Imam Tnu Nosen feels Man Ruba. Dilma Imam Tnu Nosen Kerakam Lamalter. Maybe if he said give it. Maybe immediately. If you find it right away, you give it to him. Then and he says give it. And if you find the document right away, and you and the Balamaisa, the husband or the seller, whoever wrote the document says, or the lender says give it, then you give it. Okay, then you give it. Maybe only immediately, not later. Where do you get that deduction from? In this brisa that he asked from at the bottom of Amar Aleph and the top of base, it says it says, okay, if he's motor, you give it. It's mashma, you give it no matter what the time period is. It doesn't say that. Here it says if the husband's moda, that it's the get belongs to her, you give it to her. It doesn't say anything about a time limit. There you're deducing. Ha'amar tnu nostin afil's mamruba. Didn't say that. Didn't say that at all. So that's why we say we're doing like Rabbah. So we have two answers to resolve the difference. And our Mishnah says if you don't find it right away, it's puzzle. And the other Mishnah, the Brisa, says no. If you find it, even after a period of time, if the Balma said, if the litigant says, or whoever it is, the husband or the lender, whatever says, give it, you give it even after a long period of time. The difference is that there's no traffic in those other cases, and here in our Mishnah there's traffic. Yeah.
Question is, let's say that there's not a traffic and the two people at the same name.
Right.
And you find it there. Can't you just go ahead and ask those two people if it belong to you or not? Simple.
Okay, let's say they say, well, I know I divorced my wife, but I don't know if this is the right document. They don't know. Let's say they don't know. Let's say you find them. You're right. If you can find them through other means of identifying, we're saying if this is all you've got, this is all you've got. Maybe you went to ask those two guys and said, yeah, we each divorced our wives with the same name, but I don't know which document. I don't know if that's mine. They all look alike. Who knows, right? Can you identify which, if I take out all these Sifrei Torah, could you identify by looking at them what the names are without looking at the mantle? I mean, they all look alike, who knows, right? Everything, the words are the same. What do I know? Right? So you may not know. So, but you're right. If there were other ways, don't forget, we're saying now, if you find it, it's probably yours. It's probably the one you dropped. Only if there's a lot of traffic there, there's two people by the same name, then we have to be concerned that it's possible. Don't forget, we're talking about Mater and Isha. If you had two people, right, with the same names, both Reuven and Mary, divorcing Rivka, and the Sofa wrote the star for both of them. They're going to have a party. They're both going to have and they switched the get. Each one gave it the wrong way, not divorce. That's what you're worried about over here too. Okay, now Rav Yomi gives another answer. He says those other cases, that Mishnah and the Brisa that we asked from Manal, from Rab asked from the Mishnah, Zay asked from the Brisa, showing over there that you do return it, even after a long period of time, you give it back because there's no traffic. Rav Yomi says a different answer. Amr could go into Kami Eidim, I'll get Echad Shal Yosef and Shimon. Very simple. You know what's working? You know why it works over there? When you found the get, and it says over there, you can return it. It's because the Eidim on the get, the Eidim were signed on the get. Aid number 1, aid number 2 say we only signed on one document of Yosef and Shimon. We didn't sign, even though there's 2 Yosef and Shimons in that town, and they each have a wife, it's called Rivka, whatever, but we only signed on one. There is no other one with our names on it. So then it belongs to this one. That's another way it's similar to what you were asking. If you can confirm it that way, that's how you found it. No, the Mishnah advice didn't say that. Didn't say it says if you find it, you don't return it because you don't know. But if the guy said give it to him, then it's okay. Again, only when, not because whether there's traffic or not. When you ask the Eidim who are signed on this document that you find, it said, we only signed it on the one Yosef Shimon. Now you can't find our signatures on somebody else's. We only signed on one, so this get belongs to them, right? If the 2 Eidim say, right, we only signed on this Yosef and Shimon. We didn't sign on anybody else. Maybe that Yosef and Shimon did get divorced, but we weren't the signatures on it. So then that's why it works. So that's his opinion. If you're going to come here, if you find a get and it's written on a two Adam, Adam number one, Adam number two, and they say we only signed on one Yosef and Shimon. So what's the chiddush? And of course that's good, isn't that obvious? The Mao the same Isrami Shma Kishma Adam Kadim. Maybe the other Yosef and Shimon or the other Reuben, whatever we call him, divorced his wife, and he had two Adam with the same names as these guys. So pretty far-fetched, right? Far-fetched, right? So pretty far, but that's the chiddush, and we're not concerned about that. You might be concerned about that. No, that far we don't. That's exactly the point. We don't go that far. What's the chiddush? The chiddush is you say that he's not. In that case, you can give it back. You don't have to worry about it. Well, it's obvious if the Adam say we only signed on one Yosef and Shimon. What's the chiddush? Yes, you don't have to be concerned. The chiddush is you don't have to be concerned that maybe there's another get, but also divorced Yosef and Shimon's divorcing his wife Rivka, and they had two Adam with the same names on it. Therefore, you don't have to go. Don't forget, in those days, they only usually had one name. In other words, it was Yosef and Shimon, right? Or they didn't have Yaakov, Yikasil, Ephraim, Yechiel, Avraham, etc. They didn't give those names, so it was more common to have, names that matched up. You can have very common to have, you go into a Sephardi shul where they have pretty similar names, Mashiach ben Mashiach had that too, whatever. They have one. They're very common to have the same names. Rav Shapiro, pardon?
Who's giving it back to? Balavai or to the Isha?
Give it if the husband says give it to the Isha. You would, if you're the shliach. Listen, if you're the shliach, we're talking about if you're the shliach, like in our Mishnah, you were commissioned to give it to the wife. You can give it to the wife. It's to get you found. The cases that we talked about in the kashas that we asked from the Gemara Bamitzia, Matzah Gitin Ashim, or here Matzah Get Isha, Bashuk, you can't give it to the wife unless the husband says give it to her, because then he's making you a shliach effectively, or he's telling you it fell from her. She was already divorced, right? That's what you're giving to. But if you're a shliach, then you're commissioned to give it to the wife. If you're not a shliach, the question is, you found it. Who do you give it to? Do you give it to nobody? If the husband says don't give it to her, that means that it didn't drop from her. It dropped from me. You don't give it back to either one, as we said in this case. But the question is who's the owner of the document? Yeah. All right. Now, Rav Shapiro could go into Komer Nekavish B'Tzad Ospon. So I'll tell you what. In those cases where you do return it after a long period of time, it's where the owner, like Avram asked, who do you give it back to? The owner, the lender, the seller, whatever, or whoever it is, says, there's a little hole at the side of this letter in the document, whether it's a get isha or whatever, get IOU, whatever it is, he is identifying it. That is a distinct identification mark. It's a similar. I know exactly there's a little dot, there's a little hole right next to that letter. That's okay. The Dafka B'Tzados going Dafka be said, I noticed exactly this letter, it's a very distinct mark. Avol Nekabam, it's got a hole in it, low. That's not necessary. In fact, it's got a hole in it is a very non-distinct identification mark. The paper is yellow or it's got a smudge over here. Not so good. Why? Why is that not good? In the Safkal, it's a famous Shalom but Mitzia, Simanmi Daraisi Drabanim. Bosik says, I'll call it Dashimsa, I'll sell Sama, I'll Simla, I'll Chamor, I'll Shor, I'll sell some. All these things, there's a more over there. You return it from you return the item to the lost and found, right? Elam Messias. So the Shiur in the Gemara is it Seven Da'oraisa? Minatar the Torah says you have a mark that's good enough. If it's Da'oraisa, even if it's a question of marriage, she divorced, Ish, you would also return it. But we're not sure is it Da'oraisa or is it simply a Takana Drabanan. The Rabbanan said, listen, if a guy lost an item, he doesn't always have a real good simon. He doesn't have item that belongs to him. So we say if he's got a better simon than somebody else, that's good enough. So the Rabbanan made a takana that it's that the simon is good enough to return something by. So here too, if he's got a simon muvhak, right? If it's a very distinct simon, I know there's a little dot next to a little hole next to this letter. That's an identification mark. You return it to him with that. But if it's not a clear, distinct one, it's just a simon stam. Someone said, I got a pair of tefillin, they're black. That's not such a good simon, right? Right? Or it's a blue talus bag. There's a lot of blue talus bags. Would you return it based on that? That's the shal savi adron odoraisa. Rabbi Chana story. Rabbi Chana ichs legitim. that he lost the get in the base medrash. He was a messenger. He was a shliach, Rashi says. He was commissioned to take a get from the husband to the wife, and he lost it. He went to the base medrash, he lost it. Then they found it. Omar get them, and somebody picked it up in the base medrash, and he wanted to get it back. Omar, isim isimna isli begava itviyasemga. I can return it. Please return it. I have a siman on it. I have a siman that's the one that I was carrying. That you give it back to me. I'm the shliach. Or even I don't have a siman, but I recognize it. Now rabbis who are trustworthy believe even if they don't have a real siman, but I recognize it. Sometimes you don't have a siman, but I know it's mine, right? Do you have a siman on your tefillin? No, they're black, but you could tell if it's yours or mine, right? You use them every day. You're familiar with them. So he says, either way, return it to me, either because of a siman, I have a siman, or I recognize it. Right? So they returned him the get, and he went on and he did his job, and he gave it to the woman. Omar, he says, I don't know. Did they give it back because of the siman, because of a siman daraisa? Because here, you're just on a siman you're returning to him. Don't forget, with this get, he's going to be matra eishes ish l'shuk. She's going to be able to get remarried. That's a big thing to say this marriage is over. Did they give it back the fact that it's a simple siman? I didn't have a siman mufak. I just gave a siman. It was blue, it was yellow, or something like that, or right. But a siman is daraisa, and I could even be matra eishes ish l'shuk with that. Because I recognize it. Me, Rabbi Baruch Chana, was a rabbi. Dafka Rabban, Dafka Talmudic scholar. Maybe a regular person. He says they returned it to me, but I'm not sure if they returned it to me based on the siman that I gave, because the siman wasn't a great siman, but the old siman is the Raisa, and you return it back. See, if the old siman is Rabbanan, so for money matters, the rabbi said hefker bez hefker. They could say, okay, this lost item, it's good enough to give a siman on it, right? That's good enough because the rabbi's made it the kana. The guy shouldn't lose, so people should return items, and the guy shouldn't lose it. He's probably got a better siman than somebody else, so return it to him based on that. Worst comes to worst, they're giving this item from Yankel to Shimon. They could do that, even if it doesn't really belong to him, because the rabbis hefker bes nefker. But to be matron eishes isha, a married woman, you're not going to say that a siman alone is good enough if siman is not the raisa. He says, I'm not sure if they held that siman is the raisa, or because they return it to me because I'm a rabbi, and a rabbi's believe even if he just says I recognize it, that's good enough. He said if you didn't find it right away, if you find it right away, there's no concern about traffic, about to Yosef and Shimon's. We're not concerned at all. Not right away, it's okay. What's right away? Enough time that a caravan could have come and encamped there. They could have come and pitched their camp there, right? And that's quite a bit of time. In other words, that's la'alt. If you found it within the time that it would take for a whole caravan to come and pitch camp, that's good enough, and you can continue. It's your get, and you can return. I mean, you're the shliach for that get, and you can carry on your mission. It's not enough to say enough time. It's not based on time. You have to make sure that nobody was there. It doesn't depend on a time, but you actually have to have been there. In other words, it's only good if you were standing there the whole time and you saw nobody was there. Then it's obviously yours. That's this one. That's really a tough one, right? In other words, he had to be there. Nobody could have been. Nobody stopped there. Not enough that somebody passed by there, and that you were there long enough that you saw nobody stop there. Maybe as to get enough time to write a get. Gave a shiur. Enough to read it. Enough time to write a get and to read it. Right? So we're saying now that they give different amounts of time. Enough time for a camp to be pitched. Enough time to write a get, to read a get, to write it and read a get. Some say that you even have to have stood there and made sure nobody passed there. Even if it did take a long time, but you have a simon on it, but you give a simon, that's good enough to testify on the simon. Like we said before, if you've got a specific hole at that particular letter, that's good enough, right? That's like Rav Ashi said before. Those other cases that we returned to, where he had a shemin mubah. It's not enough to say to give a lousy simon. Like for example, it was a long one. I thought the get was a long get. It's a lot of long gets, right? Like a lot of tefillin, right? Aruch, regardless it was long or short. that's not good enough because that's a siman she'eino mufak. And you want to divorce her based on that? Not so sure. We're not so sure if siman is the right or not. Matzah kosher, let's say you found it tied up in your wallet, barniki, or a wallet or a purse with the bas, or on your ring. Oshamatsu ben kev, or you found it among your clothing. You found it in your pocket. So again, the Gemara B'Metzia says these are things which are not usually lent, right? If you lend these things out to somebody else, it's not assuming that it's yours. But these things are usually not lent, and therefore, I feel as mamruba kosher, it's okay because that's clearly it fell from you. You know this is the one you were holding. Get my Rabbi Yehuda Shmuel halacha shlosha adam sham. The halacha is what's the time, the altar, and halacha is that shlosha adam, nobody was there. He said the halacha is like the one who says nobody's there. Rabbi Chana Amar Yisuf Rav Shmuel halacha shlo over sham. Nobody passed by there. Not that nobody even stopped there, but that nobody passed by there. So le'mamar halacha kamar halacha kamar. These were two shittas we said before. Rabbi Shimon Elazar said kadesh yadam omed b'rosh shlo over sham. That was Rabbi Shimon. The Yeshomim or Achayim Omrim Shalosh Adam Sham. So I just say the halacha is like the Achayim or like Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda. The answer is the Afchalu, because sometimes they reverse those opinions. Some say that it was Rabbi Shimon Elazar who said enough time for nobody to stay there, and the other opinion, the Yeshomim, said should nobody pass by there. So he's giving you the halacha that's enough time. In other words, that la'alter is only if you stood there and you saw nobody pass by there or nobody stayed there. That's when it's not enough just a time period like 20 minutes or a half an hour or some time that it would take to write again. Those are the shir. You had to actually stand and make sure nobody was there. Otherwise, it's not la'alter, and therefore you can't. You dropped it, you picked it up. If it's not la'alter, we said, and if you have no simon on it, right? And if there were a lot of traffic and to Yosef and Shimon's in the same town, then Reb Shimon says, our Mishnah says that it's possible. So according to Reb Zeir, maybe it's possible, but if there's no traffic there, right, that's not sure. And if you find it right away, then for sure it's okay. But even if you didn't find it right away, but there's no traffic there, that's also okay, as we've said before. Or if you didn't find it right away and you have a good simon on it. What's what are those things? It's like a leather little bag or a leather bottle, like a canteen. If you found it in your own canteen and you have a simon on, that's yours, right? It's made out of it. Or that's chemis kind of my dluskama. Plika the sabi. It's a little box that old people put their stuff in. In other words, these things have simanim. It's yours, and therefore the get is okay. So in most cases, you would say that the get is okay. If you lost it and then you found it, if there's not a lot of traffic there, or if you found it right away, even if there's a lot of traffic, found it right away, or if you found it with in some box that you can identify, or if you have a simon on the item itself, that this one had a little hole next to that letter, that's also okay. That's a simon mufak. I'll pick him tomorrow, Mitzvah. Have a good day.
Beautiful.